The words came out broken, desperate, barely a whisper above the rumble of Harley engines cooling in the parking lot. "Please hide me, sir." Marcus Razor Coleman had heard a lot of things in his 23 years leading the Thunder Road Brotherhood. Confessions from broken men, pleas from desperate women, threats from rival gangs. But he'd never heard terror like this from someone so young. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The girl couldn't have been more than 14. Bruises painted her pale arms like storm clouds across winter sky. Her school uniform was torn at the shoulder, navy blue fabric hanging in tatters. Her backpack was clutched against her chest like armor that had already failed her. She stood in the doorway of Lucky's garage, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, looking at him with eyes that had seen too much. Cruelty for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. What happened next would shake the quiet town of Millfield to its core and remind everyone that some lines should never be crossed. Some innocence demands protection, and some brotherhoods will move heaven and earth to make sure justice finds its way home. Pause. Build tension. Before we continue this story that will restore your faith in justice and the power of standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This isn't just about bikers. It's about what happens when good people decide they've had enough of watching evil win. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you believe that sometimes angels wear leather jackets. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and for 14 years, she'd mastered the art of being invisible. In Lincoln High School's crowded hallways filled with 800 students, she was the one teachers forgot to call on, the one coaches overlooked for teams, the one who ate lunch alone in the library because the cafeteria felt like walking into a war zone. Sarah had learned early that invisible meant safe. Her mother, Linda Mitchell, worked 3 jobs to keep their tiny apartment: night shift at the hospital, weekend cleaning at the office complex, and morning shifts at the convenience store. Linda was a warrior in scrubs and determination, but she was also exhausted, running on coffee and sheer will to survive. Sarah understood. She never complained about the second-hand clothes or the generic brand everything. She never asked why other kids had new phones while hers was held together with electrical tape. She just kept her head down, did her homework by lamplight, and dreamed of the day she'd be old enough to help carry the weight her mother shouldered alone. But 3 weeks ago, invisibility stopped being protection. It became a target. It started with Trevor Hutchins and his crew of privileged predators. Trevor was 17, 6'2", built like the football star he used to be before getting kicked off the team for fighting. His father owned half the businesses in town, including the dealership where half the school board bought their cars. Trevor was untouchable, and he knew it. He'd grown bored with his usual victims. Kids who fought back, kids whose parents called lawyers, kids who created problems. Trevor wanted easy prey. Someone who would suffer in silence. Someone who wouldn't fight back because they couldn't afford to. Sarah Mitchell was perfect. It began with whispered insults as she passed in the hallway. Poverty princess. Thrift store, Sally. Discount girl. Words designed to cut deep, to remind her she didn't belong in their world of designer clothes and expensive cars. Sarah kept walking, kept her eyes down, kept being invisible. But invisibility only works if predators choose not to see you. And Trevor Hutchins had decided to see her very clearly. The verbal abuse escalated to accidental shoves that sent her stumbling into lockers, her books scattering across the floor while students stepped over her scattered homework like she was debris. Her lunch money disappeared daily, not stolen dramatically, but taken with casual cruelty while she stood frozen, too terrified to resist. "What are you going to do about it?" Trevor would whisper, counting her crumpled dollar bills. "Call your mommy, tell the principal? Go ahead. See what happens." Sarah never called anyone. She just stopped eating lunch. The teachers saw everything. Mrs. Henderson witnessed Trevor knock Sarah's chemistry project to the floor. 3 weeks of careful work destroyed in seconds. Mr. Rodriguez heard the name calling, the constant harassment that followed Sarah from class to class like a toxic shadow. But Trevor's father had donated the new computer lab. Trevor's uncle sat on the school board. Trevor's family bought tables at every school. fundraiser, and their last name was engraved on the gymnasium wall. Sarah Mitchell's mother cleaned their offices at night. The math wasn't hard to calculate. Principal Morrison took Sarah's mother's calls with practiced patience. Boys will be boys, Mrs. Mitchell. Teenagers go through phases. Sarah needs to learn conflict resolution skills. Maybe she could try joining some clubs, making friends, fitting in better. Each conversation ended the same way, with Linda Mitchell feeling like somehow her daughter was the problem. Like Sarah's quiet nature was a character flaw that invited cruelty. But Sarah wasn't the problem. Sarah was surviving the only way she knew how, carrying pain with a grace that would have impressed saints and enduring daily humiliation that would have broken adults. Until the day survival wasn't enough anymore. That Tuesday started like every other terrible day. Sarah arrived at school early, hoping to avoid the hallway gauntlet, but Trevor was waiting by her locker with 3 of his friends. They'd been planning something. She could see it in their eyes, the gleeful malice of predators who'd cornered their prey. "Hey, discount girl," Trevor called, loud enough for early arriving students to hear. "Nice shoes. Did you fish them out of a dumpster?" Sarah's sneakers were indeed from Goodwill, bought 3 months ago when her old ones fell apart completely. She'd cleaned them carefully the night before, using an old toothbrush to scrub the worn rubber white again. They weren't stylish, but they were clean, and they fit. She tried to walk past, but Trevor's friend Jake blocked her path. Behind them, other students began to gather, sensing drama like sharks smelling blood in the water. "I asked you a question," Trevor said, stepping closer. "Where'd you get those pathetic shoes?" Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "I need to get to class." "Class doesn't start for 20 minutes. Another friend, Marcus, laughed. "We've got time to chat. Right, guys?" What happened next was choreographed cruelty. They surrounded her, pushing her gently back and forth between them, never hard enough to be called violence, but firm enough to make her stumble. Her backpack fell, spilling notebooks and pencils across the floor. "Oops," Trevor said with mock concern. "Clumsy much?" As Sarah knelt to collect her scattered belongings, Trevor stepped on her math homework, not accidentally, deliberately, grinding his heel into 3 hours of careful calculations until the paper tore. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Guess you'll have to do it again." "Oh wait, do you even have paper at home? Or do you use napkins from McDonald's?" The gathering crowd laughed. Not cruel laughter from everyone. Some kids looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. But enough laughed to make Sarah feel like the whole world was against her. She gathered her damaged homework, her broken pencils, her scattered dreams of invisibility. The late bell rang, and the crowd dispersed, leaving her alone in the hallway with the taste of humiliation in her mouth and tears she refused to let fall. But Trevor wasn't done with her. Not even close. That afternoon, things escalated beyond psychological warfare. During lunch period, while Sarah hid in the library as usual, Trevor and his crew cornered her in the bathroom. No witnesses. No teachers, just Sarah and 4 boys who had decided her suffering was entertainment. They didn't hit her. They were too smart for that. Instead, they grabbed her backpack and dumped everything into the toilet. Her textbooks, her notebooks, her only pen, her house key, her bus money, everything she needed to function, to learn, to get home safely. "Fish it out," Trevor commanded, his voice cold as winter. "Go on. Reach in there and get your stuff." Sarah stared at the toilet, at her ruined schoolwork floating in the water, and something inside her finally cracked. Not her spirit, that was made of stronger stuff, but her faith in the system, her belief that keeping quiet would keep her safe, her hope that someone, somewhere, would step in and make this stop. She reached into the toilet water and retrieved her soaked belongings, piece by piece, while 4 boys watched and laughed. Her books were waterlogged, pages swelling and text running. Her notebook paper disintegrated in her hands. 3 months of careful notes, gone. "Don't tell anyone about this," Jake said as they prepared to leave. "You know what happens to snitches." Sarah stood alone in that bathroom, dripping toilet water, holding the soggy remains of her education, and realized that the system designed to protect her had failed completely. The adults had failed her. The rules had failed her. Her silence had failed her. She needed to find protection somewhere else. Lucky's garage sat on the edge of town, where civilization gave way to desert scrub and endless highway. It wasn't the kind of place most people noticed, a weathered building with peeling paint, surrounded by motorcycles that looked like they'd ridden through hell and back. Sarah had never paid attention to it before. She'd ridden past on the school bus countless times, but it had just been background noise, part of the scenery she ignored while staring out windows and wishing she was anywhere else. But that Tuesday afternoon, walking home because her bus money had gone down the toilet with everything else, she noticed the sign, Thunder Road Brotherhood MC, and beneath it, in smaller letters that made her heart skip, respect, honor, protection, protection. The words stopped her cold. When had anyone ever offered her protection? When had anyone ever suggested she deserved it? Through the open garage doors, she could see men working on motorcycles. Big men with tattooed arms and leather vests, the kind of men her teachers warned students to avoid. Dangerous men, outlaws. But as Sarah stood there, soaked in humiliation and toilet water, watching these supposedly dangerous men work in peaceful concentration, she noticed something that made her take a step closer. One of them was helping another repair an engine, patiently explaining each step. Their conversation was quiet, respectful, focused. When a tool fell and clattered across the concrete, the older man just picked it up without irritation, handed it back with a gentle nod. These weren't the raging monsters her teachers had described. They were just men. Working men with calloused hands and serious faces, going about their business with a quiet dignity that reminded her of her mother coming home from her night shifts, tired but undefeated. The leader was obvious without any announcement. Tall and lean, with graying hair pulled back and ink covering both arms in intricate patterns. His face was weathered like leather left in the sun, lined with years of squinting against wind and weather. When he moved, the others gave him space not from fear, but from respect. Marcus Razor, Coleman had earned his road name not from violence, but from precision. 23 years leading the Thunder Road Brotherhood. 23 years of making hard decisions with surgical accuracy. He'd built this club from 6 broken men into a family of 43 brothers who'd ride through hell for each other. They weren't angels. Most had records, criminal pasts they'd left behind when they found the Brotherhood. But they lived by a code older than law books. Protect the innocent, stand by your word, and never let evil flourish when you have the power to stop it. Razor looked up from the Sportster he was tuning and saw her through the open garage door. A kid in a torn school uniform, standing at the edge of his world like she was deciding whether to jump off a cliff. He'd seen that look before, in mirrors during his own worst days, in the faces of brothers before they found their way home, in his daughter's eyes before cancer took her, when she was scared and hurting and trying to be brave. The girl took a step forward, then another. Her sneakers made no sound on the concrete, but every man in that garage felt her presence like electricity before a storm. She stopped just inside the doorway, clutching her soaked backpack against her chest, and looked directly at Razor with eyes that were far too old for her young face. "Please hide me, sir," she whispered. The garage went silent. Engines stopped rumbling. Tools stopped clanking. 43 years of Razor's life. The violence, the mistakes, the redemption, the brotherhood, all led to this moment. This broken child, asking for sanctuary in a place where sanctuary was the most sacred thing they could offer. He set down his wrench and walked over to her slowly, the way you approach a wounded animal that might bolt. When he got close enough to see the fear in her eyes, close enough to smell the desperation on her, close enough to notice the bruises on her arms, something old and protective awakened in his chest. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Mitchell." "I'm Razor," he replied, extending a oil-stained hand that she shook with surprising firmness. "This is my garage, my brotherhood. Tell me what happened." Sarah talked for 47 minutes straight. Once the words started flowing, they couldn't stop. Weeks of accumulated fear and pain pouring out like water from a broken dam. She told him about Trevor and his crew, about the teachers who looked away, about the principal who blamed her for not fitting in better. She told him about her mother working 3 jobs, About secondhand clothes and empty lunch accounts, and homework done by lamplight. About being invisible until invisibility became a target. About toilet water and ruined books and the daily humiliation that had become her normal. The Brotherhood listened without interruption. Diesel, the club's massive sergeant-at-arms, cleaned his glasses 3 times during Sarah's story, his jaw working like he was chewing nails. Phoenix, their road captain, kept his eyes on his boots, hands clenched into fists. Old Bear, the club elder at 68, sat perfectly still except for the vein pulsing in his temple. When Sarah finished, the silence stretched like a held breath. Then Razor spoke, his voice controlled, but carrying undertones of barely contained fury. "How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks, Sarah said. "But it's getting worse. Today they put my books in the toilet and made me fish them out. They said if I told anyone, they'd make it worse." "Where are your parents?" Sarah's voice got smaller. "My mom works a lot. She doesn't know. I didn't want to worry her. She's got enough problems. And my dad. My dad left when I was 6. Razor nodded slowly. He understood absent fathers, overwhelmed mothers, kids who learned too early that they were on their own. Half his brotherhood had similar stories. "These boys who are hurting you," he said carefully. "What are their names?" Sarah hesitated. "Snitches get stitches," Trevor had said. But looking at these men, really looking at their faces, she saw something she'd never seen in any adult's eyes when she talked about her problems. She saw anger. Not at her, but for her. "Trevor Hutchins," she said. "Jake Morrison. Marcus Webb. And Tommy Chin." Phoenix looked up sharply. "Morrison? As in Principal Morrison?" Sarah nodded. "Jake's his son." The Brotherhood exchanged glances. Suddenly, the school's indifference made perfect sense. The principal's son was one of the bullies. No wonder complaints fell on deaf ears. "What about Trevor's family?" Diesel asked. "His dad owns the car dealership and a bunch of other businesses. Everyone says the Hutchins family basically runs the town." Razor was quiet for a long moment, thinking. 23 years of leadership had taught him that power wasn't just about strength. It was about strategy, timing, and knowing when to act. "Sarah," he said finally, "what do you want to happen here? What would make you feel safe?" She looked confused by the question. Nobody had ever asked her what she wanted before. I just want them to stop," she said. "I want to go to school without being afraid. I want to eat lunch without them taking my money. I want to do my homework without them destroying it. I just want them to leave me alone. And if they don't? If we talk to them and they decide to make things worse for you?" Sarah's shoulders sagged. "Then, I guess I'll drop out. Get my GED early, find a job. Help my mom." The casual way she said it, giving up her education, her future, her dreams, hit every man in that garage like a physical blow. This child was ready to sacrifice everything because the adults in her life had failed to protect her. Razor made his decision. "That's not happening," he said firmly. "You're not dropping out. You're not giving up your plated future. Because some punks don't know how to behave. We're gonna fix this." Sarah looked at him with desperate hope. "How?" Razor smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't entirely gentle. "We're going to remind your school what respect looks like. And we're going to teach those boys that there are consequences for hurting innocents." He turned to his brotherhood. "Church meeting. Now, in biker culture, church doesn't mean Sunday service. It means the sacred meeting where brothers decide matters that affect the club's honor, future, and soul. No outsiders allowed. No recordings. Just brothers speaking truth to brothers." The Thunder Road Brotherhood filed into the back room of Lucky's garage, while Sarah waited in the main area, petting Ghost, Razor's ancient German shepherd who'd appointed himself her protector. Inside the meeting room, 43 men sat in a circle. Razor spoke first. "We all heard the girl's story. Now we decide what we do about it. Those boys need a lesson," Diesel said immediately. "Rich kids thinking they can torture someone weaker because daddy's got money." "Agreed," said Phoenix. "But we do this smart. No violence that traces back to us. The girl's got to live in this town after we're done." Old Bear, the club's moral compass, leaned forward. "I've got a granddaughter Sarah's age. If someone was doing this to her, I'd want blood." But what I'd want, and what's right, might be different things. What's right, said Wrench, the club mechanic, is making sure no kid ever goes through what she's going through. This isn't just about Sarah anymore. It's about every quiet kid who gets targeted because they can't fight back. So, what do we do? Asked Torch, the youngest member at 24. Show up at the school? Talk to the principal who's already ignoring the problem because it's his own son involved? Razor had been listening, letting his brothers work through their anger and find clarity. Now, he spoke. We do what we've always done. We protect family, and as of today, Sarah Mitchell is family. Heads nodded around the circle. But we do it the right way. No threats, no violence, no breaking laws. We simply show up, make our presence known. Let everyone understand that Sarah is no longer alone. The whole Brotherhood? Phoenix asked. The whole Brotherhood, Razor confirmed. And I'm calling in favors. Every club we're allied with, every brother who owes us, every man who believes in protecting innocence. We're going to that school, and we're going to make sure everyone understands that hurting our family has consequences. What about the parents? The principal? Bear asked. We'll talk to them too. Politely, respectfully. But we'll make sure they understand that their children's behavior reflects on them. That allowing cruelty to flourish in their school is unacceptable. Diesel grinned. How many bikes you thinking? Razor's smile was sharp as winter wind. How many can we get? The answer, as it turned out, was 312. Word traveled through the motorcycle community like wildfire. Razor called in 23 years of alliances, friendships, and mutual respect. The message was simple. A child needed protection from bullies, and the Thunder Road Brotherhood was asking for support. The Desert Phantoms from Phoenix pledged 30 riders. The Iron Eagles from Flagstaff promised 25. The Road Warriors from Tucson committed 40 bikes. Smaller clubs, independent riders, even some retired cops and military veterans who'd found Brotherhood on two wheels, everyone wanted to be part of Sarah's justice. By Thursday night, the plan was set. Friday morning, they would ride to Lincoln High School. Not for violence, not for confrontation, but for presence, for visibility, to show Sarah that she wasn't alone anymore, and to show her tormentors that their actions had consequences. Sarah spent Thursday evening at the garage, helping Wrench organize tools and listening to stories. She learned that Diesel had been a teacher before finding the Brotherhood, that Phoenix was working on his master's degree in social work, that Old Bear had raised 4 kids after his wife died and never missed a parent-teacher conference. These weren't the monsters society painted them as. They were men who'd found family in each other, who lived by codes older than law books, who understood that strength meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Are you scared? Sarah asked Razor as he tuned his bike for the morning ride. Of what? Of getting in trouble? Of people saying bad things about you? Razor looked at her seriously. Sarah, people have been saying bad things about us for decades. What scares me is good people doing nothing when they see evil flourishing. What scares me is children learning that cruelty wins, that power means being able to hurt others without consequences. He continued working on his engine. Tomorrow, we show your win, school and your town, that there are still people willing to stand up for what's right. That's not something to be scared of. That's something to be proud of. That night, Sarah called her mother and told her everything. The bullying, the humiliation, the bikers who'd offered protection. Linda Mitchell was terrified at first, her daughter associating with a motorcycle club. But when Sarah described how they'd listened, how they'd treated her with respect, how they'd made her feel safe for the first time in weeks, Linda's fear transformed into cautious hope. Are you sure about this, baby? More sure than I've ever been about anything, Sarah replied. Mom, they're good people. They're going to help. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Linda Mitchell had worked 3 jobs her entire adult life. She'd scraped and saved and sacrificed to give her daughter a chance at a better future. She'd tried working through proper channels, calling the school, meeting with teachers, following all the rules that were supposed to protect children. None of it had worked. Maybe it was time to try something different. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, but you stay safe. You hear me? You stay safe. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. The kind of desert dawn that painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. By 7 a.m., the Thunder Road Brotherhood was assembled at Lucky's garage, 43 bikes gleaming in the early light. By 7:15, they were joined by the first wave of allies. The Desert Phantoms rolled in formation, their black leather vests marking them as riders who'd seen every mile of highway between Mexico and Canada. The Iron Eagles followed, grizzled veterans whose bikes bore the scars of 1,000 adventures. More kept coming. The Road Warriors, the Steel Wolves, the Free Riders. Independent bikers who belonged to no club but answered the call anyway. By 7:45, over 300 motorcycles filled the desert lot around Lucky's garage, their engines creating a symphony of controlled power. Sarah stood beside Razor's bike, wearing her school uniform and a borrowed leather jacket with Thunder Road Brotherhood embroidered on the back. Someone had found her a helmet that fit, painted silver with lightning bolts. She looked like what she was, a child protected by warriors. Remember, Razor called to the assembled riders. We're here for respect, not revenge. We park legally. We follow traffic laws. We don't block entrances or interfere with school operations. We simply make our presence known. 300 voices acknowledged his words. Then, as the school bell chimed in the distance, the greatest motorcycle convoy in Lincoln County history began to move. The sound was indescribable. 300 Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, and custom machines creating a rolling thunder that echoed off canyon walls and shook windows in downtown Millfield. The convoy stretched for nearly 2 miles, a river of chrome and leather flowing toward Lincoln High School with purpose and dignity. Cars pulled over to let them pass. People came out of stores to watch. Cell phone cameras captured the unprecedented sight of hundreds of bikers riding in perfect formation through the quiet desert town. At Lincoln High School, the first teacher to notice them was Mrs. Henderson, Sarah's chemistry teacher. She was setting up lab equipment when the sound reached her, a distant rumble that grew steadily louder like an approaching storm. She walked to the window and froze. Motorcycles filled the school parking lot in perfect rows, not randomly scattered, not blocking traffic, but organized with military precision. Their riders dismounted in silence, removing helmets and straightening leather vests with patches that told stories of brotherhood, honor, and roads traveled. Mrs. Henderson had taught high school for 18 years. She'd seen parent protests, school board confrontations, and angry meetings. But she'd never seen anything like this. 300 bikers standing quietly in the morning sun, their attention focused on one small figure in a school uniform and borrowed jacket. Sarah Mitchell walked through the crowd of motorcycles like a queen reviewing her army. These men who could have intimidated anyone chose instead to nod respectfully as she passed, their faces showing not menace but protection. At the school entrance, Razor waited with 5 of his brothers, not blocking the doors, not preventing anyone from entering, just present, visible, a statement that Sarah was no longer alone. Principal Morrison was in his office when his secretary burst in, without knocking. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "you need to see the parking lot." Morrison looked out his window and went pale. 300 motorcycles, 300 bikers, all focused on his school, his domain, his responsibility. His first instinct was to call the police. His second was to remember that his son Jake was one of the boys who'd been tormenting Sarah Mitchell. His third was to realize that maybe, finally, the chickens had come home to roost. He walked outside on unsteady legs, approaching the group of bikers near the main entrance. They parted respectfully, creating a path to their obvious leader, a tall man with gray hair and eyes like winter ice. "I'm Principal Morrison," he said, trying to keep authority in his voice. "This is a school zone. You can't congregate here." "We're not congregating," Razor replied calmly. "We're escorting. Sarah Mitchell is a student at your school. We're here to make sure she feels safe." Morrison's face flushed. "If there are problems with student behavior, there are proper channels." "We tried proper channels," interrupted Phoenix, stepping forward. "Sarah's mother called you 4 times. Your response was that kids will be kids, and Sarah needs to learn to stand up for herself. We don't discuss specific student issues with concerned community members? Bear asked, his voice deceptively gentle. That's interesting, because I think a school administrator would want to discuss why a child feels so unsafe in his building that she had to seek protection from strangers. Morrison looked around at 300 faces, all watching him with patient intensity. He dealt with angry parents before, but never angry parents who rode Harleys and outnumbered his entire staff 50-1. What do you want? He asked. We want the bullying to stop, Razor said simply. We want Sarah to attend school without fear. We want the boys who've been tormenting her to understand that their actions have consequences. And if I refuse? Razor's smile was thin as a knife blade. Then we'll be here every morning and every afternoon, making sure Sarah gets to and from school safely. 300 of us, taking shifts, ensuring that your failure to protect a student doesn't result in further harm. Morrison swallowed hard. That's intimidation. No, said Diesel, stepping forward. Intimidation is 4 boys cornering one girl in a bathroom and forcing her to fish her homework out of a toilet. What we're doing is called protection. Inside the school, word was spreading like wildfire. Students pressed against windows, watching the unprecedented scene in the parking lot. Teachers gathered in hallways, whispering about the army of bikers who'd appeared like something from a movie. Trevor Hutchins stood at his locker, face pale as ash, watching through the window as his world tilted off its axis. For 3 weeks, he'd tormented Sarah Mitchell with impunity, secure in the knowledge that his father's money and influence made him untouchable. He was learning that some things couldn't be bought. Jake Morrison, Marcus Webb, and Tommy Chin clustered around him, their usual swagger replaced by barely controlled panic. They'd expected consequences eventually. A detention, a stern talking to, maybe a suspension if someone made enough fuss. They hadn't expected 300 bikers. This is insane, Jake whispered. They can't do this. They're doing it, Marcus replied, his voice shaking. Through the crowd of leather and chrome, they could see Sarah Mitchell walking calmly toward the school entrance, flanked by bikers who moved like a protective honor guard. She looked different, taller, stronger, like someone who knew she was no longer alone. As she approached the entrance, Trevor made a decision born of desperation and privilege. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. This is ridiculous, he said loudly. You can't bring these people here. This is a school. Sarah stopped walking. Behind her, 300 engines went silent. The morning air suddenly felt electric with tension. She looked at Trevor Hutchins, the boy who'd made her life hell for 3 weeks, and spoke in a voice that carried clearly across the parking lot. My name is Sarah Mitchell, she said. I'm a student at this school. These are my friends. They're here because you and your buddies decided that tormenting a girl who never did anything to hurt you was entertaining. Trevor's face was red now, anger mixing with humiliation. You can't prove. We don't need to prove anything. Sarah interrupted. Everyone knows what you did. The question is what happens next. She stepped closer, and Trevor instinctively backed away. You have 2 choices, Sarah continued. You can keep being a bully and deal with the consequences. Or you can learn to be a decent human being and leave me alone. She gestured toward the parking lot full of motorcycles. Either way, I'm not helpless anymore. I'm not alone anymore. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. What happened next became legend in Lincoln County. Trevor Hutchins, faced with 300 witnesses to his humiliation, made the worst possible choice. He reached out to shove Sarah, the same casual violence he'd used to assert dominance for weeks. He never made contact. Razor was there instantly, his hand catching Trevor's wrist with surgical precision. Not violent, not painful, but absolutely final. Son, Razor said quietly, that would be a mistake. Trevor found himself staring into eyes that had seen real violence, real consequences, real justice. Eyes that had no patience for privileged boys who thought power meant the ability to hurt others. Let me go, Trevor whispered. When you apologize, I'm not. You're going to apologize to Miss Mitchell for 3 weeks of harassment, humiliation, and assault. You're going to mean it. And then you're going to walk away and never bother her again. Around them, students watched in absolute silence. Teachers stood frozen. Principal Morrison looked like he was calculating whether his pension would survive the aftermath of whatever was about to happen. Trevor glanced around desperately, looking for support that wasn't coming. His friends had melted into the crowd. His father wasn't there to buy his way out of trouble. For the first time in his 17 years, he was facing consequences he couldn't avoid. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "Louder," Phoenix said. "And look at her when you say it." Trevor raised his eyes to meet Sarah's. She looked back steadily, no longer the frightened girl he'd tormented. She was someone else now, someone protected, someone who mattered. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "I'm sorry for everything. I won't bother you anymore." Sarah nodded once. "Thank you." Razor released Trevor's wrist, and the boy stumbled backward, rubbing circulation back into his hand. "Walk away," Bears suggested gently. "Learn from this. Become better." Trevor walked away. His friends followed. The crowd of students parted before them, like they were carrying something contagious. Principal Morrison approached Razor carefully. "Is this over?" "For today," Razor replied. "But we'll be watching. If Sarah reports any further problems, any retaliation, any attempt to make her pay for what happened here today, we'll be back. And next time won't be as gentle." Morrison nodded quickly. "Understood. I'll make sure there are no further incidents." "You do that." As the morning bell rang and students began filtering into the school, Sarah stood at the entrance, watching her protectors prepare to leave. 300 bikers, mounting their machines, preparing to return to their lives but leaving behind the promise of protection. Razor approached her one last time. "You gonna be okay?" Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in weeks. "I think so. Thank you, all of you. You've got our number. You've got our word. Anything happens, anything at all, you call." She nodded. "I will." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Sarah, you did good today. Standing up to him like that, speaking your truth, that took real courage. I learned from good teachers," she replied, gesturing toward the parking lot full of motorcycles. Razor grinned. "We learned from you too, kid. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help." The story of 300 bikers showing up at Lincoln High School spread through social media like wildfire. Videos taken by students went viral within hours. News stations picked up the story by evening. By the next day, it was national news. Local biker club protects bullied student. 300 motorcycles show up for teenage girl. When schools fail, bikers step in. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive. People shared stories of their own experiences with bullying, their own children who'd suffered in silence, their own frustration with systems that seemed designed to protect bullies rather than victims. Sarah Mitchell became a symbol of something larger than herself. The idea that no child should face cruelty alone, that sometimes heroes wear leather jackets, that strength should always protect innocence. But the real transformation happened quietly, day by day, in the hallways of Lincoln High School. Trevor Hutchins kept his word. He didn't speak to Sarah, didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her existence. His friends followed his lead. The reign of terror that had made Sarah's life hell simply ended. More importantly, other bullies took notice. Word spread quickly that targeting the quiet kids, the vulnerable ones, the students who seemed powerless, might have unexpected consequences. The Thunder Road Brotherhood had made it clear that some children were protected by more than just school policies. Teachers began paying closer attention. Mrs. Henderson started eating lunch in the cafeteria, her presence discouraging the casual cruelty that flourished when adults looked away. Mr. Rodriguez began walking the hallways between classes, his eyes alert for the subtle signs of harassment he'd missed before. Principal Morrison implemented new anti-bullying policies with actual enforcement. He hired a counselor specifically to work with at-risk students. He held assemblies about respect, dignity, and the consequences of cruelty. Some cynics said it was fear of bad publicity. Others believed it was genuine reform. Sarah didn't care about the motivation. She only cared that it worked. 3 weeks after the biker's visit, Sarah ate lunch in the cafeteria for the first time all year. She sat alone, but she wasn't afraid. She knew that if anyone gave her trouble, she had protectors who would ride through hell to defend her. A month after the incident, something unexpected happened. A sophomore named Marcus Chin approached her table. Not Trevor's friend Marcus Webb, but a quiet kid named Marcus Chin, who'd been invisible for different reasons. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. Sarah looked up, surprised. "Sure." They ate in comfortable silence for a while before Marcus spoke again. "I saw what happened. With the bikers. That was really something." Sarah nodded. "They're good people. I've been getting hassled too," Marcus admitted quietly. "Nothing as bad as what you went through, but, you know, the usual stuff." Sarah set down her sandwich. "Do you want me to call them?" Marcus's eyes widened. "You think they'd help?" "They told me they protect family, and family protects family. So, if you're my friend, that makes you family too." It was the beginning of something beautiful. Within weeks, Sarah's lunch table grew. Marcus Chin, Jennifer Lopez, a shy girl with thick glasses who'd been targeted for her accent. David Kim, whose stutter made him an easy target. Rachel Thompson, whose wheelchair made her different enough to attract cruelty. They called themselves the Chrome Wings. Kids who'd found strength in the promise that someone was watching out for them, that they didn't have to face the world alone. The Thunder Road Brotherhood began visiting the school regularly. Not as intimidation, but as mentorship. Diesel, the former teacher, started an automotive club. Phoenix helped students with college applications. Bear shared stories about resilience and finding family in unexpected places. They taught practical skills: how to change a tire, how to balance a budget, how to stand with confidence. But more importantly, they taught hope. They showed kids who'd been written off by society that everyone deserved respect, protection, and a chance to build something better. 6 months after the bikers' arrival, Lincoln High School was a different place. Bullying incidents had dropped by 80%. Graduation rates were rising. College enrollment among at-risk students increased dramatically. Sarah Mitchell had become an unlikely leader. The frightened girl who'd begged for protection had transformed into someone who offered protection to others. She started a peer mediation program, helped establish an anonymous reporting system for bullying, and worked with the administration to create safe spaces for vulnerable students. Her grades, which had suffered during the worst of her torment, rebounded dramatically. She was taking advanced placement classes now, thinking about college, planning a future that had seemed impossible 6 months earlier. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Trevor Hutchins. The boy who'd terrorized Sarah had undergone his own transformation. The shame of being publicly humiliated by the bikers could have driven him deeper into cruelty. Instead, it became the catalyst for self-reflection. 3 months after the incident, Trevor approached Razor at Lucky's garage. He came alone, without his friends, without his father's protection, carrying only the weight of his own remorse. "I want to make things right," he said. Razor studied him carefully. "What does that look like to you?" "I don't know. I've been a piece of garbage for years. Not just to Sarah, but to a lot of kids. I don't know how to fix that." "You start by admitting it. Which you just did. Then you work to be better." Trevor nodded. Will you teach me how to be better?" It was an unexpected request from an unlikely student. But the Thunder Road Brotherhood had always believed in second chances, in the possibility of redemption, in the idea that people could change if they truly wanted to. Trevor became a regular at Lucky's garage. He learned to work with his hands, to find satisfaction in building rather than destroying. He discovered that strength meant protecting others, not dominating them. He began apologizing to his former victims, not grand gestures, but quiet acknowledgments of harm done and promises to do better. Most importantly, he learned to use his privilege as a weapon against cruelty rather than a tool for causing it. When he saw bullying happening, he stopped it. When teachers ignored problems, he reported them. When other popular kids picked on the vulnerable, Trevor Hutchins, 2C, former bully, reformed predator, stood in their way. The transformation wasn't instant or perfect. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But the Brotherhood was patient, firm, and unwavering in their belief that everyone deserved a chance to become better. 2 years after 300 bikers rode to Lincoln High School, the story had become larger than any of its participants could have imagined. The Chrome Wings mentorship program had spread to 12 schools across 3 counties. Motorcycle clubs that had never worked together found common ground in protecting children. The model, combining biker brotherhood values with youth advocacy, was being studied by social workers, educators, and policymakers. Sarah Mitchell, now a senior, had been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. She planned to study social work and education, with dreams of creating programs that protected vulnerable kids before they reached crisis points. "I want to be someone other kids can turn to," she explained to a reporter doing a follow-up story. "Not everyone's going to have 300 bikers show up for them. But maybe they can have one person who cares enough to listen, to act, to make sure they're not alone." The Thunder Road Brotherhood had become unexpected celebrities in child advocacy circles. They spoke at conferences, consulted with school districts, and worked with lawmakers on anti-bullying legislation. Their patch, a winged wheel with protection written beneath, had become a symbol of hope for families dealing with school violence. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the simplest one. Linda Mitchell no longer worked 3 jobs. The publicity surrounding Sarah's story had led to job offers, speaking opportunities, and eventually a position with a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping single parents. For the first time since Sarah was born, Linda came home before dark, had energy for conversations, could be present for the daily moments that had been stolen by exhaustion and desperation. "I got my daughter back," Linda said in an interview. "Not just safe from bullying, but confident, strong, ready to change the world. And I got my life back too. I don't know how to thank people for that." Sarah knew how. Every day, she worked to pay forward the protection she'd received. Every kindness shown to a struggling student. Every moment spent listening to someone who felt invisible. Every time she used her voice to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. It was all gratitude made manifest. Trevor Hutchins had his own story of transformation. Now a sophomore at Arizona State University, studying education, he volunteered with the Chrome Wings program, sharing his story with other kids who were walking the path he'd once walked. "I was the bad guy," he told groups of students. "I was the one making other people's lives hell because I could, because I thought power meant being able to hurt people. I was wrong about everything." It took 300 bikers showing up at my school to make me understand that real power means using your strength to protect people, not hurt them. His relationship with Sarah had evolved from tormentor and victim to something more complex, not friendship, exactly, but mutual respect between people who'd survived the same story from different sides. "She saved my life as much as those bikers saved hers," Trevor reflected. "She could have wanted revenge. She could have used her new protection to make me pay for what I did. Instead, she showed mercy. She gave me a chance to be better. That's the strongest thing anyone's ever done." On a warm Tuesday evening, 5 years after a scared 14-year-old girl had whispered, "Please hide me, sir," in a garage doorway, Lincoln High School held its annual Chrome Wings graduation ceremony. 53 students who'd been helped by the mentorship program were graduating. Some were heading to college, others to trade schools, still others directly into careers. All of them carried with them the knowledge that they mattered, that they were protected, that they had found family in unexpected places. Sarah Mitchell, now a sophomore at Arizona State studying social work, was the keynote speaker. She stood at the podium, where 5 years earlier Principal Morrison had struggled to address the aftermath of the bikers' arrival, and she looked out at an audience that included students, parents, teachers, and dozens of bikers whose leather vests told stories of roads traveled and battles won. 5 years ago, she began, "I was invisible, not by choice, but because I thought invisible meant safe. I was wrong about that. Invisible just meant alone. And alone is the most dangerous thing a kid can be." She paused, looking at the young faces in the audience. Some confident, others still struggling, all of them listening with the intensity of people who'd found hope in unexpected places. The Thunder Road Brotherhood taught me something important. They taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. It's about who's willing to ride through hell to make sure you're safe. It's about who believes you deserve protection even when you don't believe it yourself. In the audience, Razor sat with his brothers, his weathered face showing the pride of a man who'd seen broken things healed, who'd watched fear transform into strength, who'd learned that sometimes the best way to honor the road you've traveled is to clear the path for others. But here's the thing I really want you to remember, Sarah continued. You don't have to wait for 300 bikers to show up to start making things better. Every single one of you has the power to be someone's protector. Every time you stand up for a kid who's being picked on, every time you include someone who's sitting alone, every time you choose kindness over cruelty, you're being part of the solution. She gestured toward the bikers in the audience. These men taught me that strength is supposed to protect innocence. That power is supposed to lift people up, not tear them down. That the measure of a person isn't what they can destroy, but what they choose to build. The applause that followed was long and heartfelt, but Sarah wasn't finished. So, here's my challenge to everyone in this room. Be someone's chrome wings. Be the person who shows up when someone whispers, "Please help me." Be the voice that says you're not alone. Be the strength that protects instead of the weakness that destroys. She looked directly at the students who were still struggling, still fighting, still trying to find their way. And if you're the one who needs protection, who feels invisible, who doesn't know where to turn, remember this: you matter. You deserve safety. You deserve kindness. You deserve a future where you can be proud of who you are. Sarah smiled, thinking of a terrified girl in a torn school uniform, who'd found courage in the most unlikely place. Sometimes angels wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles. Sometimes family is found on the road instead of at home. Sometimes the most important words you can say are "Please help me," and sometimes the most important words you can hear are "You're safe now." The graduation ceremony ended with tradition, students receiving their diplomas, families celebrating achievements, young people stepping forward into futures that had been protected and nurtured by the simple radical idea that everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them. As the crowd dispersed into the warm Arizona evening, Sarah found herself standing next to Razor in the parking lot, watching Chrome Wings mentors help graduates load their belongings, watching families hug and laugh and plan for tomorrow. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For teaching me that asking for help isn't weakness. For showing me what real strength looks like. For proving that, sometimes, the most dangerous-looking people are actually the safest." Razor nodded, looking at the young woman Sarah had become, confident, compassionate, ready to spend her life protecting others the way she'd once been protected. "You did the hard part," he replied. "You had the courage to ask. Everything else was just brotherhood, doing what brotherhood does." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last of the graduates drive away into their futures, carrying with them the knowledge that they were never truly alone, that someone was always watching out for them, that their lives mattered enough to be worth protecting. In the distance, motorcycle engines rumbled to life as the Thunder Road Brotherhood prepared to ride back to Lucky's garage, back to their own lives and roads and responsibilities. But they carried with them the satisfaction of work well done, of innocence protected, of a scared child transformed into a confident young woman ready to change the world. The road stretched endlessly ahead, full of possibility and promise, protected by those who understood that the greatest journey anyone can take is from fear to hope, from isolation to family, from victimhood to the strength that protects others. And somewhere in the desert night, the sound of motorcycles carried on the wind like a promise. You are not alone. You are protected. You matter. The Chrome Wings would always be flying. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.